California's been described as one of the least business-friendly states in the nation. How, during what is arguably the worst economic climate in decades, is more regulation on business going to help stimulate the state's economy?
Well, one way it helps stimulate the economy is it begins to reduce public health costs that we're already spending through health insurance and other things, to the tune of $1.2 billion a year. And it begins to reduce the costs of all of the other implementation measures that we need to look at as far as improving public health. And that air quality figure is really pretty important. There's a reason why the American Lung Association is one of the #1 supporters of the No on 23 positions, because they understand this is killing us on other business costs. One of the problems with every economic analysis that's been done of this so far is that it only takes into account the cost side of the economic equation, and it does not calculate the benefits. So we say it's going to cost how much money for small business, but it's actually going to benefit them in other ways as well. And all regulation has that impact. I'm not a big fan of regulation. I personally think government is the worst way to do something. But when we hand over the California electoral process to Valero and Tesoro and processes where 97% of the money is coming from oil companies and 90% from out of state, we are handing over our ability to make those decisions about regulations to out-of-state interests who are only interested in increasing their corporate profits. We need new jobs in California, and I think we should be building them of every color as well. AB 32 is not a panacea. It is not going to create an entire new economy, but it's a start, and it has public health benefits and other benefits that come along with it. So I'm not going to make the case that regulation is good for business. I don't believe in the long run it's the best way to do things. I think the private marketplace is the best way to do things. But sometimes we need it in order to achieve a public benefit and a public good.
I think it's first important, as we're talking about regulations, to point out that California already has the strictest air quality and the clean water quality regulations in the country. We've got the clean air emissions regulations, we've got the Pavley auto emissions regulations, solar roofs initiative. So California has the strictest regulations. In fact, what we hear from small businesses right now, 99.7% of the business community, is overregulated. And frankly, the scariest part of AB 32 is that it is an untested regulation at a time when we can least afford it. It is hard to say and to be palatable for a small business baker or a person who's running his auto shop or whatever to say, let's try an experiment in California. Let's try a 60% energy tax increase experiment when I can least afford it. So the bottom line is California is overregulated, but also to put people at ease here, because you hear the other side often say, well, Clean Water Act and the Air Quality Act, we already have the strictest air quality. Prop 23 does nothing to discourage that, does nothing to mess with that. It actually keeps all of those in full effect and intact. What it does is it says, let's get jobs back on Main Street. Let's get people working again. People are out of work and they're struggling. Let's get people, let's remove the regulation, and with AB 32, all we're saying is, let's just push the pause button. We'll come back to it when unemployment gets down to a point where it's acceptable. For now, let's get people working again.
We'll now entertain some questions from the audience.
Yeah, I talked to a farmer and a contractor that would be that would have to face this energy problem, and they had two scenarios. One of them was that if they would have implemented that regulation, so if a diesel engine needed to be repaired, for example, if a truck, in every truck's life, they have to replace the engine. But he said whether the truck was a brand new truck or whatever, you would have to have a $15,000 carbon dioxide device that would have to be put on that, or the truck would have to be sold and junked. And another problem is, like, I asked the city about their backup generator that they have. Brand new generators only used if the power goes out. I asked if this is implemented, what will happen? Well, he would have to buy a $15,000 addition to that new generator.
So what's your question, sir?
So I wanted to
Question?
ask him, why didn't, and I'm saying, well, why would that be a problem? And I'm saying, how do you think this affects all of the farmers and businessmen that have good equipment that's top notch, but who do you think it's fair for them to have to spend this great amount of money, either go out of business or cut their budget and cut employees to stay in compliance? That's all.
Thanks for your question.
So this question relates to the implementation of the diesel emission.
Yes.
And how much that will cost small businesses and people that are operating diesel engines. And there are a couple of strategies for how to do this. And many people may have noted that the California Air Resources Board is rewriting their regulation on diesel emissions, and they're looking at putting new standards in for what would require filters and other things. But think about the way we did this with automobiles, when we switched from leaded gasoline to unleaded gasoline, and then we gradually increased the emission standards for automobiles. How many people think the technology on their automobile today is a heck of a lot better than it was 20 years ago? A lot of that technological innovation came in because we were looking at ways to change engines in order to get more efficiency and to reduce emissions. So in my humble opinion, the way to do it with diesel emissions is to do it gradually, to require it at replacement time rather than at the beginning of the life of equipment. My understanding is that the Air Resources Board's rule looks at a 7 to 10 year period for filtering equipment. In the cases of stationary equipment, I agree that there are going to have to be some places where we are spending the $15,000 for a filter. But the case I would make is that we need to take a little bit of immediate cost in order to reduce other costs later on down the line. And I would compare that $15,000 cost to the cost to public health and ask yourself, where would you rather save the money? On the $15,000 filter on a stationary generator, or in the amount of money that you're paying to subsidize public health at the local level in order to provide health care services to people with respiratory disease, asthma, and other problems. So it's not either or. You need to look at both of them together, the cost and benefit at the same time.
Next question.
Yeah,
We have time for another question.
Yes. First of all, as far as the health care benefits, I thought Obamacare was going to cover all that. But my real question is, last week it was revealed that the calculations that were done by the scientists that supported the AB 332 actually overestimated the problem by 300%. And to me, that one, I don't know exactly what that means as far as the bottom line, but as far as the credibility of why we need that law has just escaped me. So could you answer that?
Yeah, my understanding is that there were two elements to that. And one element was that they crunched the data wrong. And in the review of it and in looking at how they were going to implement it, that came up as an issue. It was brought up by a number of different interests in the state, and that's why they're changing the diesel emission law. That's one reason. The second reason is that it didn't calculate the downturn in the economy that began in 2007 and 2008. And we actually have seen a reduction in emissions since the end of 2007, beginning of 2008, because of the reduction in economic activity. That has nothing to do with the Air Resources Board regulations. It had to do with the natural reduction in emissions that was going on. And then the third reason is that they actually underestimated the application of new technology towards removing emissions. And the trucking companies and actually the manufacturers are actually implementing this new technology faster than they anticipated. So a good portion of that 340% that was off had to do with the speed of the application of new technology and its ability to address the problem. But I do agree with you that if regulation is burdensome and it doesn't work, it should be thrown out and it should be done again. I totally agree with that. I think you have a totally valid point that if something is wrong, it needs to be stopped and a new approach needs to be taken. And that's the right way to do it. That's what we should have government do.